Okay, here we go. Welcome to the last official session of Great Decisions 2020. This is, by the way, the 10th year. I just realized that last week. We've been doing it for 10 years. Um, well, I don't know. We should have a bomb because 10th, usually 10th anniversary has something special, but maybe the special this year is the elections next week. I've been studying. Of course, I understand from some that have already voted, but I've been studying the ballots here very closely to see who I'm going to vote for. And I don't know, there are so many names I'm not familiar with, and I had to research all of them.
Vote for 11.
So who voted one party completely? Raise your hand.
Well, one party, no.
One party? No. Who does that?
I mean, I voted for some. I voted for a few because there was no other options. But
Okay.
I did vote like straight, with the 80% straight ticket.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I don't think it's fair to do that, but unless you truly believe in all of these individuals. Anyway, we read the book. We kind of, before we started this discussion, we kind of discussed the book and the video. I did not really learn much from the book, uh, but it is information that we had to read. So I'm going to ask all of you to start. The first individuals who joined us were Steve and Judy. So I'm going to ask Steve and Judy to start us off, followed by Paul and Marie, and then Vince, and then Mr. Young, Dr. Young. Go ahead, Judy and Steve. What did you learn that you worth sharing with us?
Well, we're going to have different comments. I remember when I went to MIT in 1961, there was Marvin Minsky had an artificial intelligence lab, and it just lingered along there. And all the time I was in Boston through the 1980, the AI kind of came along, but you didn't hear much about it. When the internet and all these things came, the baby is being born, and it's like the nuclear weapon. I mean, we're at the beginning of the end of the Manhattan Project. This is going to be revolutionary. It's going to affect where we build bridges, where we use rapid transportation, what our cars look like, how we move around, where we live. It is very important. Now, after the Manhattan Project and the atomic bomb, George Marshall and Harry Truman were smart enough to say the world has to cooperate on this, and we have to be prepared to take our position in this. And they worked on NATO, and they worked with the UN, and they worked internationally, and they developed our State Department, and they continued the relationship between science and industry. And then Reagan came along and said, no, small government. We got to end all this. We got to get rid of everything with the military. We don't need a Secretary of State. I tell you, we need a George Marshall and not a Mike Pompeo. And I think we're at the beginning of something dramatic. And I think our nation is losing its chance to be at the forefront. And it's just being very naive about the whole thing. That's my opinion.
So do you believe that the US has the highest power, most power in artificial intelligence? Are we the most intelligent among all nations?
No, we're not. We in China share this, and Europe is in it. It's just like the atomic weapon. I mean, the Russians had it, the French had it, the English had it. It didn't take long for the Israelis to have it. I mean, you can't. The book I thought was so flawed because it even implied that we could control it. We can't control it. The best we can do is help to manage it, but we've got to be willing to commit the resources on a worldwide level to help to manage it.
Any comments?
Yeah, well, it rolls into my comment that the problem is when the nuclear arms race was played out, there was high stakes, but it was really between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, and it was a race who could develop the best weapons, and we stayed with our allies on the at least neutralizing whatever they could do. And one wonders exactly how effective their weapons were. But I don't see that happening on this particular one. I think it's a race as well. That was going to be my comment, in fact. People that frame this as something that we have to cooperate ain't going to happen. China does not play by rules.
That's
They
true.
don't play. They play by a different set of rules. They have no rules. The rules are, we'll do what's good for China. We don't care about the rest of the world.
Yeah, I believe it's somewhere it says about the AI unicorns. In the book, it mentioned that the US has 17 of the 34 AI unicorns, which are the startups, AI startups that have over $1 billion worth of value. That the US kind of, I think it's 32. There are 32 AI unicorns, and the US has almost half of them.
Yeah, China has 6.
Yeah, China has 6. So,
Overall onesies.
so if that's true, then we do have the highest power. And the contention here is, the question is, if we are the most intelligent, should we not curb some information so that we are always ahead of others, or should we play it out and give everything we know, share it with others, so that we are at equal levels with everybody else?
If you listen to people like, is it Schmidt of Google and stuff like that, they talk about the way to go ahead with this is with rivalry partnerships.
You know,
Yeah.
if we don't, and they talked about the need to sort of set the stage and agree on ground. You don't have to share all your ideas or share all your data, but you have to be willing to participate in efforts to establish guidelines.
Yeah.
And we have become so isolationist. It's like after World War I and not participating in the League of Nations. We've just become complete isolationists, and we aren't going to have a place at the table when it comes to deciding what this thing's going to be structured like. And we may have a little bit of an edge, but it won't last. And if we're kind of made, if our structures are made antique because the rest of the world agrees on something and we aren't part of it, then I think it's very risky for us.
Okay.
I think the film certainly.
You're next, Vince, anyway, so go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I think the film.
Vince, and then go ahead, sorry.
I think the film certainly suggested that nations should try to share this type of information. Did you all think that?
Right, for the good of the public, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. My comment that I wanted to share was just more of an observation and a desire or a hope. But the artificial intelligence that uses facial recognition in China that they use to control their people. I read about this a number of months ago, but they'll cite people for like jaywalking, and all kinds of other such of activities. I don't think there's any cameras inside of homes, but there are cameras all over outside of homes. And if you do anything wrong, such as jaywalking, I think it's a point system. And if you get so many points against you, you lose things, or you have to pay stuff. Anyway, when I read about that months ago, I really hope for Tiananmen Square 2. I really hope that the people would rise up, because to me, that was such overreach, understanding the control that China has over their people, but still, obviously that didn't happen. And it appears like it's not going to happen, but I sure wish something like that would happen, because I think the Chinese people deserve more freedoms, et cetera, than they have. So that's my comment. Thanks.
Right.
But we agreed that certain kinds of human DNA research would not be done. And well, lo and behold, a Chinese scientist went off and did some. He thought he was going to make a name for himself by abolishing sickle cell anemia, but it was outside the protocol that was internationally agreed on. China censored him, and he disappeared. He shouldn't have done that, and they agreed. So I hope we can get to that level in AI, that things that shouldn't happen get censored, and maybe that includes kinds of things that Vincent was talking about.
I'd like to add to what Vince said, if I could. In the video, they showed a lot of the cameras in China, and Paul and I had the wonderful experience of visiting China last year, and we had a particularly forward-thinking tour guide who had been in the United States, actually in Durham, North Carolina, for a short period of time. And she was very candid with us. She voiced very strongly and emphatically that we should not ask certain questions that would be
Controversial.
recorded when we were going to Tiananmen Square. And she said, because there will be videos and recorders everywhere. So please, if you have a question or a comment about something that is sort of controversial, please wait until we are at a more private place to have that conversation. Well, of course, there was one guy who had to ask some really inappropriate questions in the group. It wasn't a really big group. We were totally aghast that he did that to her. And she just repeatedly said to him, this is really not the place or the time to discuss that. And anyway, over and over again. Well, when we were back on the bus, she proceeded to tell us how when Chinese nationals are selected out for showing some dissonance with the way the government is operating, they are whisked away and harmonized. That's the term she used. And we're like going, whoa, I mean, it's like, they'll just remove you from society and take you off somewhere. And who knows when you'll ever see your family again, or if they'll see you. I mean, she didn't go into great detail, but I just thought, for Pete's sake, folks, give the woman some credit. She knows what she's talking about, and don't harass her or antagonize the situation. And then we saw all those pictures with all the cameras and everything. And well, we saw them when we were there too, but
There's tons of cameras.
they're everywhere. They're everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Lee?
I have a comment on what Vincent was saying about he was surprised that the
John, you're muted for some reason.
I thought I'd unmuted, but anyway, relative to Vince's statement about he was surprised that the Chinese are putting up with this. I don't think very many people have the opinion that we do, that we can, the right to privacy. That nobody needs to know anything about anything. And if I don't want to wear a mask, nobody can make me. If I want to do this, nobody can make me. And my experience, particularly with Asians, is that they're working for, excuse the word, harmony. And they give a whole lot more than an American would. And it's just a comment from the time I spent with in Japan and working with Asian students. They don't have the same attitudes we do about privacy.
Catherine?
Oh, I've got so many things, but I'll just do one and then come back to something else.
Yep.
I'm interested to know how people feel about what the general public knows about AI, because to be perfectly honest, I was vaguely aware of it and going about my normal life, and it didn't really impact me until after I read this Great Decisions. And I'm feeling like if I'm that way and I consider myself a normal person, I think the general public is completely unaware of the potential that AI has for gathering information or using it against us or for us. And I wonder if the news agencies have not jumped on this as an interesting, side article that they would throw up once in a while. And I was wondering what you all think about why we don't hear more about AI in the general press.
I can make a recommendation. There's a really, really good Frontline. If you don't have a Roku and can pull up PBS and Frontline, it's on YouTube, but it's called The Age of AI.
Okay.
And it's about 2 hours long, but
Okay.
it goes really in depth as to everything that it goes more in depth than the little film we saw or what the book talks about, because
Okay.
it talks about how industry is using more mechanization, robots, and how that's throwing people out of work and how that's destroying communities. And that's something that didn't even get really discussed very much in the book or in the film. And it also goes really in depth as to laws about privacy and what Google is doing, and how people just think, oh, I'm using Google to look up stuff.
Right.
But no, Google's looking at you and what you're doing. And it goes into a lot of details. So it's a very, very informative program that covers all these different bases. And it talks about China quite a bit too. And some of the, authoritarian capitalism, that's going on with China, and using all this, like Vince was saying about finding you and rewarding you, and it's like Big Brother. It's like 1984
Right.
is what it is. So there is information out there. You just kind of have to really dig for it. It's not a quick headline or anything like that. You got to dig kind of deep to really learn all about it. I was shocked like you. It's just, it has the potential to really blow up and be a disaster and challenge democracies everywhere.
Catherine, I think you're right. I think there's many people that don't know much about AI, but there's a lot of people that do know a lot about it, and there's a lot of sci-fi stuff on it, but some of it may not be so sci-fi. And what I mean by that is there are those that literally believe. There's a doctor in town named Dr. Donapudi. He's a endocrinologist, very smart man who literally believes, and many people do, that someday there's the possibility for AI to control mankind.
Okay, that's Gene, you were next after Lee, but since you've already started, Barry and Gene, do you have another comment, or do you want to jump into Lee?
I just wonder, it's kind of off the topic of AI, but related. I wonder how many people saw the headline today that the Justice Department is suing Google, their antitrust activity.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they do is that they make their search engine the default search engine. So if you have an iPhone, for instance, everybody's iPhone is set to use Google as your search engine unless you change it. And I didn't even realize that until I saw an article on it. But,
Interesting, Barry.
All right.
Yeah, so there's lots of. Am I muted?
No, you're fine.
Okay. Lee's making
He
faces
can
at
only
me.
fish.
He wants to talk.
Oh. Okay, Lee, the floor is yours.
Unmute yourself, Lee. Unmute yourself. Or you want me to ask you?
Poor Lee.
Okay, here we go. Click on yes. Okay.
Okay.
Speak.
Yeah, I was just saying I was muted. My whole impression of this is amazing in terms of the Star Wars type thing, but my worry is about the integrity of the individual. I had read a book previously, World Without Mind: The Existential Threat of Big Tech by Franklin Foer, F-O-E-R. And let me just read, our faith in technology is no longer fully consistent with our belief in liberty. Our ideas about the comparative marketplace are at risk. Privacy cannot survive the present trajectory of technology. The proliferation of falsehood and conspiracy through social media, the dissipation of their common basis for fact, is creating conditions ripe for authoritarianism. So over time, the long merger of man and machine has worked out pretty well for man, but we're pulling into a new era where the merger threatens the individual. And that, I mean, look at, I agree with some of the comments that have already been made. Look at these people walking down the street, minding their own business, and they got cameras that know just in an instant who that is, where they've been, what kind of technical savvy they have, where they shop, when they went to the bathroom last, their bladder's full, you better get off to the side, that sort of thing. And there's a lot of good here, but I don't want to be living in China, and I don't want America to put up all the cameras, and there's too much control. I mean, it's neat, and it's amazing that technology is there. But when we can sit here and visit, Google somebody, and I say Google because just like Google is the kingpin of this whole thing, Facebook and Google. It's mind-boggling, and I'm not sure that we have any control over it. I mean, our government. Somebody made the comment in the video about they weren't sure that what in the world is Congress doing anyway? They're just a bunch of people sitting around talking. What kind of rules are they passing?
All right, so I've got several hands up, and Cheryl, go first, and then Catherine. And I thought Judy had something else at some point, but
I had a bunch of stuff I wanted to talk
well,
about.
wait, okay, let Cheryl go because she hasn't said anything yet. Cheryl?
You were talking about Google. Here's something from Wired magazine in August. Last week, a technique popularized by DeepMind, the AI division of Alphabet, the parent company of Google, was adapted to control an autonomous F-16 fighter plane in a Pentagon-funded contest. And it was coordinated by DARPA. So we need to remember that we do have a lot of people working on this in the government. In the final stage of the event, a similar algorithm went head-to-head with a real F-16 pilot using a VR headset and a simulator controls. The AI pilot won 5-0. So I guess I agree with Paul. I'm not sure it's wise to worry about going global and getting all of these global standards set up and counting on everybody to play by the rules. The potential for AI to be weaponized is really scary. So I guess that's my thought.
Okay, Cheryl, is that your thought? So I'm gonna scratch your name off. And I'm gonna have to let Catherine talk first. Ed, then you can come after Judy, I'm sorry. So Catherine, Judy, and then Ed.
Okay, I'm wondering how realistic it is that we are going to, even in our government, be able to decide what our standards are and our role in AI and the use of it, even just within the United States. Committees are sometimes functional, but currently I don't have much faith in progressing and agreeing. I can see that this is a nonpartisan issue, but does anyone else have another feeling about how realistic it is for us to, even as a country, before we even work with other countries, be able to come up with our standards in a timely manner.
Can I add to that? We're all talking about the government doing this or that. Is everyone really enamored with the Googles and the Amazons and the Facebooks about what their motives are? To me, their motive is one thing, it's money. And I go back to the railroads and the oil and these monopolies that formed. Clearly we have some monopolies in the tech industry that are no one can compete with. Obviously, they can't get the data. And do I really trust these people to do the right thing? They can talk the talk, but I'm not sure they'll walk the walk.
Well, you know what Facebook and Google did with the recent revelation about Hunter Biden and evidently Joe Biden, and they said no, they shut it down. They prevented proliferation of what might be false, it might be true, whatever. But the fact is, they censored everybody in the country, basically.
Well, they didn't censor them. They did not make it go as fast as it would have, but we all know about it. So if they were censoring it, they must be pretty incompetent.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're supposed to go in front of the committee, I think tomorrow or Thursday, and testify about what happened in this particular incident, evidently.
So please, I have two things to mention right now, because obviously we're jumping around and there are some people that have not said anything yet. When you have a comment, don't ask a question, please, because when you ask a question, then somebody has to respond and we lose the sequence. So if you have a comment, just say the comment, but don't ask a question so that we can continue with the discussion. Judy?
Yeah, I want to take it in a different direction, Hani. I want to talk about China. And I know everybody's probably sick of me in Belt and Road, but the purpose of Belt and Road was to be competitive with the United States, to move from being a middle power to a superpower, to solve the maritime problems, to solve their overcapacity and export more. And you know what? We always think about the infrastructure and stuff, but in the last year, they have pivoted. And one of their big areas now is AI and the digital services. And the Rhodes guy in the film was the only one who said that China is at least on a par with the United States or ahead of us. And they are ahead of us. They're ahead of us in voice recognition, in face recognition, in 5G. They're already started on 6G. They're ahead of us in telecommunications. And I don't think there's enough known about where they're positioning and how they're going about it. And I find that scary. And as a former historian, and Paul, listen to this one, you'll love it. China is in the process of digitizing all their data. They talked about that in I think it was the film a little bit. But in this process, they are rewriting their history.
All right, good information. I need the Gary, and Tracy and Cleese. Gary, Tracy, and Cleese.
Got me, Hanny.
Oh, Ed, sorry, Ed, go ahead.
I'm going to start a little controversy here. Okay, I want everybody to consider that AI is a good thing, that it is inevitable, that it has been going on for a very long time at a different scale, and that all of the things that we're accusing China of, we invented. Our marketers, our Procters and Gambles, they invented data mining, long before China did. And, they've been watching your American Express transactions, since back in the 90s. We used to do this and append your data to it. And what I do agree with is that it's all mercenary, it's all pecuniary, it's all tied to how you can make more money. I'd argue that these Chinese that have cameras that catch you jaywalking and send you a ticket, try going through a toll booth without paying the toll. Your license plate is photographed, and in 2 days you get a ticket in the mail.
Yep.
Like this has been going on a very long time, and like let's look at some of the good things. Let's look at like electronic, HMR, like the medical records. How AI is going to aggregate all of your medical records, and I know that we have some physicians here, and I'd be interested in your feedback on that. And they're going to be able to look at outcomes and effectiveness of treatments. They're going to be able to to identify things that doctors may have missed or misdiagnosed. And it's going to be good for you. And like my last anecdote, like goes back to the home furnishings business. Back in the 17th century, when they invented the first textile machines, which were arguably the first computers, it put all the craftsmen out of work. The weavers typically, wove the cloth by hand. And when they had these these mechanical machines that had these wooden cogs in them that caused it to be mechanized, and it improved the productivity, that what the craftsmen would do is they would take off their shoes, and because they were French, their shoes were called sabots, and they would throw their shoe into the machine, and then it would break the wooden cog, and that's where the word sabotage came from. I mean, that's literally where the word sabotage came from. So, it's like, this is inevitable. Last January, I went to the Consumer Electronics Show, and I saw this in action. And like they would measure, like every time you came back to the booth, that like of the 70,000 people there, they were able to identify you and like when you were there before. And they also had the facial recognition that allowed them to read the expression on your face, and like they were selling this so that if you were a retailer, that when a retailer, when a customer came in the store, that the camera would recognize them, that it would access their records, you would know what they had been interested in, and you would know before they got to the counter whether they were in a good or bad mood. Now, on one hand, like that's really scary. On the other hand, like I can see where like that helps everybody. So I'm out. I stirred the beehive.
But that's good. I like this. State your case, and we'll move forward. But that's good information. So still, Gary, your turn. Unmute yourself. I'll let you know. I'll let you unmute yourself. Go ahead.
I have in the military back in the 50s. We were doing the work for the NSA. We monitored everybody. I was impressed at that stage in this world that I could look at things that were taking place in some country that we were monitoring. And I thought we were so far ahead of the game. But find out that they were doing the same thing to us, that we were kind of behind the 8 ball. They knew what we were doing, and they were feeding us. So I'm concerned now that I don't hear anything that we're building something, a wall. I heard the word wall in the video, but building a wall to keep some of the data that we collect just to ourselves. And at the same time, Google and Facebook, with all their technological folks, need to be hacking into what the other countries are doing, especially China. I've also been in IT for a long time and did a lot of code, did a lot of hacking, did a lot of nefarious things. But I don't hear our politicians getting ahead of the curve. No. They're always wanting to write a law to stop what somebody's doing rather than getting ahead of the curve and saying we need to be ahead of everybody else instead of just trying to block technology. Facial recognition, I don't have a big issue with that, rather than letting China do all of it, because China is going to use facial recognition eventually as their counterintelligence. They're going to have the facial recognition from the people that we have on the ground in these countries, and they're going to know it before they can collect any data. So data is a secret, but we need to be ahead of collecting that data, and we need to collect it primarily for the security of our people. And I don't see that our politicians are doing that.
Okay, thank you. I know that you got Barry and Jean and Catherine, your hands are up, but I would like Tracy to go first, please.
Did you say Cleese had to jump off?
Tracy.
Oh, sorry. I have a few things because I haven't been able to comment on the other perspectives. So with kind of following up to what Vince said, I read an article that China is actually making bans for the COVID crisis and imprinting barcodes on them with their own identity numbers so that they have to actually scan them when they go on a bus, when they go to the restaurant, so that there's some sort of contact tracing if they have to get back to the people that they were in contact with, or that's so what they say, you know, that was their excuse for that. So I thought that was interesting. And then with something that Cheryl mentioned about the aircraft, I also saw something on 60 Minutes where they're automating semi trucks to drive because shipping has become such an issue and there's not the fatigue that a driver has when you automate it. So there's massive semi trucks that are already on the road right now that are making shipments. They don't have to worry about the maximum number of hours that they can drive before they have to stop. So that's another area that's really getting into AI. And then when Barry was talking about Google and how powerful it is, you know, it's pretty powerful when we use Google as a verb. You know, I'm going to Google this. And I think with what Ed was saying, we actually had a doctor that stopped by here not long ago that brought in a chip that he put on his shoelace that had all the medical information that was encrypted in the chip. And he was saying if somebody were out power walking or somebody were out and just fell over, they literally could scan that chip and have all of that information on that individual, the identity of the person, what medicines they were on, what medicines they couldn't have. So that was kind of incredible. And that's a local doctor here. I wish I could remember his name, but Brad is actually working with him on that. And then as far as the marketing, we do a lot with AI and with chatbots and SEO and all these different things. I think people don't realize when you hear a lot of people, like Catherine was saying, not everybody really knows about it. They think about cameras and they think about different things, but it's actually taking place on your phone. I don't know how many times you've talked about something with your phone nearby, and then all of a sudden it shows you an ad of exactly what you were talking about. So that's real life AI. And we as marketers, even for the Furniture Mart, we actually pay to do that. So it's just really interesting how everything kind of tied together. I felt what I originally was going to talk about was that I thought that I feel that companies should be held responsible for the content that they provide, because I think we have become so much, we have been wrapped up in this misinformation. There's so much misinformation. It used to be where you could listen to the media and, you know, you would just take it for granted that that was the truth. And there's just with the digital age and so much social media, I just don't understand how everybody just accepts misinformation and doesn't want to hold the people that are creating the misinformation accountable. So tried to fit everything in, but
That's
those
good.
are all my comments.
You did very good. And instead of the shoelace, might as well put it in the bracelet or in the necklace. You get, at least it always stays there. Shoelace might disappear.
Or in
Cindy.
the cloud that's tied to your face.
Yeah, Cindy, go ahead. You're muted. Okay, here we go.
I'm genuinely not that strong on AI in terms of understanding all the different things it can be used for. I also am worried that we're going to step too far back from something that's moving forward anywhere in a lot of other countries. Stepping back is a problem. You mentioned that China uses it, but they also have used it constructively. I had a student whose passport was stolen as we were going out of the airport in Beijing, which is really terrifying. But they have so many cameras, they were able to track immediately. I went to them and they immediately tracked to see all the way back through where he had come, saw the person who picked it up, tracked that person down by photo recognition to the area where he was waiting, and got the passport back. It's not a matter of saying it's all bad. There are good things. We need to be a part of building clear limits on what we want done with it, because it can be misused. But to assume that we can afford to step away is assuming that we can somehow stop the evolution of technology, and that will put us completely out of the loop. Then the use of it can be abused very badly because we've stepped away and we're not watching. I liked a lot of the things on the video because they did think about some of these things. So it's not something we can stop. You're not going to be able to say, I don't like it, we shouldn't have it. It's developing. If it's developing, we need to see how it's developing, what's happening, and be a part of the process rather than watching it happen and hope it gets it right.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Jean, and then O'Berry, whoever, and then Catherine, please.
Okay, going back to what Judy said, I saw a really good little quote that said that it talked about data is now the new oil and China is the new Saudi Arabia. And I think, you know, with any technology, there's good and there's bad. I mean, that's the way it's always been. So it's important, I think, for governments to get in on the ground to lay the groundwork. And, you know, now the genie's out of the bottle and you're trying to stuff it all back in. And that's just so much work and it's so complicated. However, I think in California, they did, there was an individual who was upset about all of this with Google and with Facebook, and he got a petition and it went to their legislature and they passed a law, and it passed immediately. On Republicans and Democrats voted for it to enable people to set their privacy so stuff isn't shared. So that was done in California, but of course, you know, the corporations don't want that. So they're afraid that's going to happen on a federal level. So it'll be interesting to watch California and see if that can kind of grow from there to perhaps kind of get things better under control. The other thing was I was going to talk about the good things is the medical stuff. I mean, they can really do a lot with mammograms, you know, just looking at mammograms over the years and really with so much detail, and our brains just can't compute all of this information, and they can detect which person might develop cancer in the next year as opposed to doing unnecessary surgery on a bunch of people. So, you know, clearly there are a lot of good things, but unfortunately our government is just so awful right now that, you know, we can't rely on it to do what it needs to do for the people. Otherwise we could harness all this good stuff and keep all the bad stuff, you know, under control. But, you know, that's the way it is right now, which is sad. Yeah.
Sad.
It's
someone likes to say.
Well, as a marketer, I can tell you two things that you can do if like you're really bothered by this. One is you can control your settings on all of your social media and on your Google search engine, where you can block that. You can control that, and you can Google how to do it. It's not that hard to do it. What's a lot more fun is to use misdirection. It's like these artificial bots are not very smart. And so like you all of a sudden like develop an interest in ice skating, and you visit a bunch of ice skating sites and you like sign up for ice skating newsletters. and like the ice skating companies are gonna like inundate you with stuff, and it's gonna confuse the hell out of the bot, who can't make sense out of that, why they would be willing to do that. The other thing that you should do is that for each of your, like, like in the olden days, like when you used to get direct mail, you know how and you wanted to know who was selling your name to get on your list? You change the spelling of your name. You use a different first name. You spell your name a little bit different. I have a sheet where, like I'm like Ed, Edwina, Svetlana, and I know where all these lists came from, so that I can see where the things are coming from. You do the same thing with your electronic stuff, and then like you can track back like where those things are coming from. So the bad part about AI, like AI eventually is going to win with a fair set of rules. The AI is always going to beat the best chess player. He's always going to beat the best Go player. It's always going to beat the best, like truck driver or airplane driver. It's not fair. It has like too much more data. What it can't do is it can't sort out bluffing, and it can't sort out misinformation. It just aggregates all your information as if it's all true. And so you can mislead it. If you look in your phone tracks everywhere you've been, over the last, like year. You can look in, it shows you like where you went, how long you stayed there, when you left. It's like that information is available for anybody who knows how to mine it out. Unless you turn it off, or like the best thing to do is to mislead it. Sorry.
Okay, send us a manual by email to everybody. All right, Catherine.
Okay, well, today on the news, there was a thing that for $1.29 or 100 rubles, you can sign up for a chatbot out of Russia that is taking pictures. Anyone can send in a picture if you sign up. You can do it 100 times for $1.29. And for example, Barry could send a picture of me that he got off of the internet, and the chatbot will take off all my clothes and make it look like I'm naked. And so I'm thinking, where is the people getting all of this time to be able to do this? Because they've had millions of hits. They have thousands of people who have signed up, and it's out of Russia for some reason, but the software is weaponizing women and using their own Facebook, posting that they went to the mall or something like that. It's sexualizing them. It's allowing strangers to do that. You can have your coworkers, they could be doing that. And so I know that Ed's saying that there's a lot of good AI, but you've got to be aware that there are a lot of creative people out there that are doing things that are not good for us.
Catherine, that is all over the European press this week. That is the topic.
All right, everybody has talked, so I'm gonna open the floor for the next 9 minutes or 8 minutes. I'm gonna say one thing in the last minute. So anybody has any comments, raise your hand, or just John, or just John and then Steve. John and then
a couple of follow-ups on stuff we talked about. The Google's antitrust suit. I remember when it took 10 years, I think, and we broke up Big Telephone. And now there's 2 telephone companies instead of 1. They would have had to break up into a second company anyway, because would have gotten so big. On having Google stuff built into the computer, one of the things I hated about starting to get new computers and all this stuff was all the Microsoft stuff I had to have. I didn't want to use the Microsoft search engine. I couldn't take it off the computer, or the computer wouldn't work anymore. So they're continuing to do this, and I don't know that we'll be able to do anything about it. And basically, this is not intelligence. It's data processing.
Yeah.
Somebody writes a program. It is following instructions that a human being wrote it out for it to do, and it's just doing it so fast and looking at so many different things. It's doing only what that person would have done if they were that fast. So it's not intelligent yet. Now, when it becomes sentient, then we've got a whole different story. But then there's a wonderful array of science fiction about when the computers become sentient.
Yeah.
And this goes back. I could tell you a couple of stories of science fiction stories I read over 60 years ago that were talking about this very thing and how some people beat it. So it's but I never knew what this article was about, by the way. I just go back to that. It started out talking about reconstructing the seas.
Yeah, the ocean.
Talked about too much data under too many controls. Out of 20 odd years of doing these things, this is by far the least informative and least instructive. It's in a class all by itself. I don't know why it showed up.
Yep. Steve? Thank you, John. Go ahead.
You know, we haven't talked about quantum computing, and we're just on the edge of that, and that's going to change things dramatically. You know, when a laptop can have the power the largest mainframes today have, and that's likely to come with quantum computing, then we'll start getting on the edge of sentient processing. But I really wanted to talk about, the film talked about the GDPR convention in Europe. And that meant that in Europe, they've agreed who can collect what kind of data and how it might be used. And, you know, I talked about that the medical community and the scientific community has agreed that certain things won't be done. And when they are done, actions are taken. And in Europe, they put this GDPR in place, and it says you can't collect this kind of data. And there's a professor at Lenoir-Rhyne that's a real expert in this field. And he said, you know, I don't understand. In Europe, the governments have a fairly large database, but the kinds of data that companies can collect and the kind of databases that companies can assemble is very restricted and very monitored and controlled. And it seems in this country, if the government's collecting a lot of information, it's sometimes hard to see, but private companies are certainly collecting it. And we know that they are driven by profit alone. So, you know, we talked about sort of setting up guidelines both inside the country and internationally. And other, you know, some disciplines like the medical community has done it. Europe has done it on what kind of databases can be established. So I think there's a need both nationally and internationally to have certain guidelines about the kind of data that will be assembled and who it will be made available to.
Okay, thank you. Cindy, you have a comment?
Yes, we're right to be concerned, but we should also be excited about. Look at some new technologies that are being used in the scientific community to do things like predict hurricanes and tornadoes and massive weather changes and get the word out quickly. I have somebody at NOAA who said they could not do by hand what the machines, once they program them with the information needed and access the data about all that's going on, they can get out almost before the people know that it's available. They get the information out and get people out of the danger areas when something is happening. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we were nowhere close to being able to give that information out. We're good at it now. And you're right, it's cooperation. Europe is cooperating, Asia and the US all are working together because the weather matters to all of us. So our scientists, who are a lot less political, are sharing information that matters and putting it to good use without limits, but with a proactive, positive voice.
Well, I can tell you that, you know, if I'm at a football game and someone passes out 2 rows in front of me, it'd be nice to be able to take my phone and show them and just frame their face and get, bam, all their medical problems, their medicines, and I could probably help that person a lot better than if I don't know, it's just a person laying there. So, I mean, that's a good thing.
Yes.
Cheryl? And then Vince?
Taking that to a whole higher level, you know, it might be that AI will be what enables us to survive as a species as we face increasingly hostile climates, increasingly more deadly pandemics, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Vince?
I was just going to say, I agree with what a lot of people are closing with here, that there are a lot of positive applications to AI, and also that there are limitations within the United States. I know I've heard of a couple of court cases where the police tried to shoot, police can use a camera like out and about from one car to another car, but a couple of cases where the police tried to use a camera into someone's home, and that was considered inadmissible. So there are limitations in the United States to this type of activity.
Okay, all right. Cool. So one comment about the, first of all, Google is not the default for internet for Apple. It's not Google. It's, what's the other one? I'm trying. What is it?
Safari.
What?
Safari.
Safari, yes, Safari is. So anyway, but in our close at 6:58, I want to ask a question, nothing related to this. I think we've covered this. I'm surprised we had so much discussion about AI because it was not very clear from the book what the discussion would be generated. But I do have a question. I may have mentioned this last time, but there was somebody stopped, rang on the door, and was somebody who's doing analysis of the elections, and she said, "You are listed as a Republican." I said, "I am." I said, "I haven't been for years, but okay, that's fine. Your data is not very accurate." I said, "What else do you know about me?" And we started talking we talked for about 20 minutes. And then I said to myself, what is actually North Carolina law for information that can be shared about voter registration? And I researched it, and there are 13 states, I think, that do not allow voter information to be shared with the public. But North Carolina, it says any person and for no fee can ask for voter registration information. And that information that can be, I'm gonna read it to you, it's long, I'm gonna read everything, but it says North Carolina is, so it can be IKLMN. So North Carolina is, where are you? Here we go.
Let me help you out, Hanny. I'm on the board of elections.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we can share. Yeah, you can get information about any voter in North Carolina. You can find out which elections they voted in, and you can see what party they're registered with. Of course, you cannot see any information about who they voted for in a particular election. But if in a primary, you have to determine whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, and that's public information.
Okay, but it also, thank you, you're right, but it also says, what is the file used for? It said not specified. Under North Carolina law, it doesn't specify what this information is used for. And the only people who can stop this information from being divulged is the ACP participants. ACP is the Address Confidentiality Program, which is the domestic violence people who are trying to hide their address. Otherwise, you have no law to protect you as a voter. So anyway, but I thought it was interesting information. All right, so
I have a tip before you hang up.
Yes,
you
sir.
should always register as an independent.
I am.
You know, because and then the second thing is that if you're ever, you know, like unlucky enough to be drafted to work on somebody's campaign, you know, and you want to know like who voted and who didn't vote, you know, Barry is exactly right. You can get a list of everybody that voted, you know, in every election, you know, and when people tell you that they voted, like you know who didn't vote because their names are there. Like you can check and see if your children voted. You know, I told my children if they didn't vote that I was going to like kick them out of the family.
Yeah, no, I understand. I just wanted to know, I was interested to know, because in my opinion, this information should be your own information should be private, but okay, some of it is not, some of it is, but I am an independent. I've been independent for many years, but somehow the Republican Party still has me as a Republican, which is fine.
Because when you register as an independent, you show up on both rolls.
Yeah, I know.
And that's why like if you check your mailbox, you're getting just as many Republican postcards as you're getting Democrat postcards.
I'm throwing everything. I'm not even reading anything anymore. Anyway, so next week we'll have a final week of elections. I've got a lot of stuff to share with you. I've started doing that. I'll finish this week, and I hope that you all will take the opportunity to be present and discuss that, because it's, how many have voted so far? Over 20 million? Okay, all right, good, good. So all of you, mostly, I'm gonna vote tomorrow. I didn't feel too good today to vote, but I will vote tomorrow. And then I hope to see you again next Tuesday. And
Mary, you made it very easy.
Very good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah,
Few tips
Appreciate
were
it.
great.
Good. Glad you like them.
I'll see you at the polls, Barry. Okay,
Okay.
good night. Good
Thanks,
night,
Bonnie.
everybody.
Good night, thank
Bye,
you.
good night.
Bye-bye.